Hush now and listen closely. If the darkness ever finds you exhausted alone driving, and the familiar road melts away into one that is not on the map, then you have been chosen. You are now on Seven Turns Road. There is no why, no ritual to escape, and absolutely no turning back. Your only path is forward. I have walked this path, and this is what you must know. The first turn seals your fate. The temperature will plunge and the roadside signs will warp into nonsensical, unsettling symbols. Ignore them. This road hunts the unfocused mind. You may slow, you may pause for a breath outside, but do not, I warn you, ever get comfortable leaving your vehicle. By the second turn, your radio will ignite on its own. It will start with a whisper, then a woman's voice will emerge, narrating your deepest, darkest secrets, truths you've told no one. Keep your eyes glued to the road. Your survival depends on ignoring the siren's call. The third turn swallows all familiarity. A black, oppressive forest rises, its canopy suffocating. On either side, hollow-eyed husks, what look like animals, will appear, fixed like grotesque statues, their heads slowly pivoting in unnatural synchronization as you pass. Do not acknowledge them. If you glance back, you will see their fur sloughing away, revealing slick, chitinous exoskeletons beneath. They see you. Drive on. At the fourth, your fuel gauge will plummet, your headlights will flicker. The voice in the radio will grow clearer, narrating every breath, every blink. It is trying to lure you out. Remain inside. You are only safe within the metal shell. The fifth turn brings silence and snow. A blizzard so intense that your engine sound, your very breathing will be absorbed, leaving only a faint ringing. In the whiteout, silent, shadowy silhouettes will crawl toward your car, attempting to pry their way in. Drive through them. Pretend they're not there. The next shifting sign signals your sixth turn. Take it immediately to the right. Your hearing returns as the snow vanishes. The road degrades into grinding gravel. Then, an open field filled with hundreds of dark, towering figures appears. They're not trees. They are charred bone and twisted bark, with smooth, empty faces. They will emit the cries and screams of everyone you have ever loved or failed. You will feel an urge to stop. Accelerate now. The sound of cracking bone beneath your tires will be deafening. Relief washes over you at the final, flowery turn until your car dies. Every warning light screaming, plunging you into absolute, consuming darkness. Do not move. Do not speak. Remain silent and still. You will hear tapping, scratching, and heavy breathing as countless entities inspect your vehicle. Then something massive will open, and your car will be pushed down, descending into something terrible. You will hear the crunch and shredding of metal as your sanctuary is chewed apart. The car will compress around you until consciousness fails. You will wake up gasping, back on the quiet roadside where the road first claimed you. You survived, for now. But the road never forgets its travelers. I have escaped it more times than sanity permits, and I tell you this. I am typing this from what should be my driveway, but when I look up, all I see is the endless road, the distorted signs beckoning. Seven Turns Road calls me again. Our narrator, just out of high school, cooked up a complicated scheme with his girlfriend for a secret weekend at her father's remote lakeside cabin. A web of lies involving grandparents, separated parents, and a friendly alibi was spun to buy them a night of freedom. Despite his self-confessed paranoia, the plan initially worked perfectly. They met at the cabin. They had their night. But then, in the dark hours, a message arrived. Her father was coming back at dawn. Panic seized them. They scrubbed the cabin clean and at 2 a.m. scattered into the night, the narrator heading for his grandparents' house hours away. Driving alone on an old, forgotten highway, his paranoia turned to outright terror. He expected his exit after 15 minutes. He never saw it. He looked down. His phone was dead, completely bricked. He was lost on an unending ribbon of road, with no signs, no lights, and no civilization. Just the truck's headlights, the forest, and the guardrail. After what felt like hours, a terrible hope appeared. Street lamps. But these, too, were endless, stretching into the blackness with no buildings or other cars in sight. Frustration built into raw fear. Then, the truck's radio exploded in a deafening, unceasing static. He couldn't turn it off. In his rage, he watched the endless streetlights begin to dim one by one as the static faded with them. Then, absolute silence and darkness, broken only by the hum of his truck. The respite was brief. The static roared back to life, and all at once, every single street lamp blazed on in a menacing, sinister, blood-red light. Overwhelmed, he knew he had to turn back. But as he slowed to attempt a U-turn, the red lights behind him began to go out, consumed by a palpable, rushing darkness. A darkness that felt like a pursuing monster. He slammed the gas pedal down, fleeing a terrifying chase where the darkness seemed to consume his trail. He prayed, weeping, when suddenly the red lights began to strobe, plunging the highway into a dizzying, sickening rhythm of red hell and black nothingness, synchronized with the snapping static of the radio. Finally, the lights ended. He sped onto a dirt road, escaping the immediate threat, but relief was fleeting. Then the warning began. A woman's voice, devoid of emotion like a news broadcast, blared from the radio. Two dead on the highway. It repeated over and over, an agonizing chant. As he drove, red lights began to flicker in the woods surrounding him. His fuel light dinged. He was nearly empty. Then, in his headlights, a yellow, mangled sign, dead end. The chanting grew deafening as a single powerful red light materialized directly behind him, gaining fast. To crash was certain death. To let the light catch him felt like damnation. He slammed the brakes and wrenched the wheel, making a sharp turn, just as the massive red light slammed into the side of his old truck. Eyes squeezed shut, he could hear and feel something heavy and dreadful crawling on the outside of the cab. He vomited and lost control of his bladder, reduced to a terrified, weeping mess. The thing began to tap on his windshield, the sound of cracking glass keeping rhythm with the infernal chant. Two dead on the highway. It lasted an eternity until suddenly the tapping in the radio stopped. When he finally forced his eyes open, the cab stank of fear and sick. But the terrifying darkness was gone. He was still driving, and through the windshield, the glorious, undeniable illumination of daylight filled the air. He was back on the highway. Miraculously, he was at his own exit ramp. As he reached the stop sign, the radio gave one final chilling sound. One dead on the highway. The truck bore the evidence. An empty tank, a dent from the impact, a pinhole crack in the glass, and unexplained extra mileage. He was safe, and so was his girlfriend. But the question remains, haunting him. When he escaped that evil road with that voice announcing one dead, did he leave that monstrous thing behind, or was the warning about him? He survived the drive, but a piece of him remains on that endless red-lit highway. There once was a child, a quiet, watchful soul who did not draw pictures but only spirals. They filled the margins of her notebooks. Tight, precise, endless loops. They were not a phase, as her mother claimed, but a lifeline. She drew them to keep the world from slipping through her fingers. Then the drawings began to draw her. It started subtly, a faint, unnaturally perfect spiral, etched like a tattoo on her wrist. She stared, and the vein twisted, deepening under her skin, pulling at the flesh like a miniature, living whirlpool. A low, electric buzzing began beneath the surface. The world outside began to reflect the shape within. Her morning coffee swirled long after the spoon was lifted. Her hair coiled into tight, wrong spirals. Her very fingerprints, once looped, became sharp, drilling ridges. When she scratched her itching scalp, she found the skin puckered, feeling not like bone, but like a tightly wound spring, a slithering thing coiling beneath her skull. She saw them everywhere, in the air that no longer blew but rotated, in the clouds which were not drifting but folding into vortexes across the sky. The cracks in her walls and the patterns of mold in her fridge were all the same, endless looping paths. The final change came with the ceiling. One night, the shadows unpeeled from the walls, pooling above her. The ceiling bowed upward like a chest inhaling, and then it exhaled a taste of ash and static into her mouth. She woke with a void inside her, cold and stretching. She tried to tell her brother to show him the coiled molar she'd plucked from her jaw, the spiraled tissue beneath a self-inflicted cut. But he only stared, distant, then began tracing his own wrist, searching for the pattern. She recorded herself sleeping. The footage showed her sitting up, her pupils black and spiraled, tearing paper and books into strips, then calmly swallowing the coils with a slow smile. When she tried to write her name, the pen refused to draw words, creating only ancient looping glyphs, a language that would outlive her. Her reflection no longer showed her face, but a window. And through that window, she was standing still, while the world behind her curled inward like a closing fist. He fled. This morning, she opened her front door. There was no sky, just the spiral stretching across everything, the trees, the houses, the clouds, all twisting into a vortex of bone-colored mist. She stepped out, and the path she walked became part of the infinite coil. She understood then. The spiral was not a pattern she drew for safety. It was a place, a path, a tunnel. She had not been protecting herself. Our narrator, Casey, knew heartbreak early. Her little sister, Marge, vanished, and in the aftermath, their father only offered a cold command. Move on, she's dead. But Casey couldn't believe it. The two girls had shared a deep fear of the dark forest that loomed behind their home. A fear they kept at bay with tales, including a chilling local legend about a heartbroken, ghostly woman, our Miss Havisham, who lived deep among the trees. If Marge was truly gone, perhaps she was merely a ghost, just like the woman in the story. Since the disappearance, Casey's gaze was fixed on the forest. She studied every leaf and branch, feeling she was stalking it. When the police came, they dismissed her suggestion to search there, signing the cast on her broken arm and leaving a trail of her father's disappointment in their wake. He had given up on Marge too quickly, just as he had when Casey's mother died. The loss of Marge's presence, the simple, terrible question of whether she had ever been real, was harder than the thought of her death. At school, Casey became an object of morbid fascination, shadowed by the indifferent, watching forest. Only Rachel Montpelier, a sharp, nosy girl, approached her directly. But Casey guarded her secret, her suspicion of the forest, even from Rachel. 2 months later, driven by an incessant, internal itch of desperation, Casey finally ventured into the woods. The familiar shadows and hot, oppressive air of the forest forced a terrible truth upon her. Marge could be dead. She was weak, easy to frighten, easy to kill. The journey felt meaningless, yet Casey pressed on until she reached a clearing. There, shrouded by the trees, stood a dilapidated house. Miss Havisham. Casey called out to the legendary ghost, her voice a terrified croak. Miss Havisham, have you seen my sister? Marge, please just tell me if you're there. No one answered. Casey was doomed, pleading with a myth while her father sat at home, waiting for her return, unused to worrying, but with nothing left but her. A body was found later that month, not Marge, but a girl from a nearby village, Bonnie Jones. The killer was still out there, picking girls off one by one. Rachel, who had now become Casey's close conspiratorial friend, pointed to the forest on an August afternoon. "You can't find something you don't believe in finding," Rachel said, her voice utterly empty. She began to speak in riddles, separating the house from the home, the iris from the optic disc. "The trees are just the house," Rachel explained, her breath tight. "The home is the roots. It's embedded in the ground, Casey. It's everywhere. The Montpeliers swore that every tear would be a death." Rachel confessed that she, a Montpelier descendant, feared her own tears were killing people. But as she wept, her forehead pressed against Casey's collar, she whispered a terrifying, impossible truth. "Maybe in the home." A final, blinding clarity struck Casey. Her father, the cold, distant coward, was the origin of all her pain. He had given up on Marge, for the same reason he had retreated after her mother's death. Casey had been looking at the wrong evil. She had blamed the forest, the house, when the truth, the home, was sown from cruelty embedded in the ground of their life. Casey ran home, propelled by a terrible certainty. Marge wasn't in the forest. She wasn't just gone. She was home. Her heartbeat radiated from the floor. Her presence was sprawled in the attic, in her bed, in the very walls, and she was in their father's eyes as he looked up from the TV. The truth was simple, echoing, and brutal. A father can throw a fist and a girl can lose her sister. Casey was left with the horrible knowledge that she had stared at the trees for months while the monster sat in her living room. She now wonders if the look on her face matches the one her father wore when he took Marge, and Bonnie, and Claudia, and the others. All those girls who are now just broken spiders congregate in the dark. Casey knows her own broken arm will send her to Marge soon, and she hopes she can bring them all rest. They say the hour before dawn is the devil's time. For one man preparing for his wedding, it was just the hour for overtime. But on this morning, routine died before the sun rose. He stepped out at 3 a.m. and saw it, the fog. Not the gentle morning mist, but a sentient, suffocating blanket, thick as a shroud. Visibility vanished, and a gnawing certainty took root. He was being watched. His drive was a crawl through a white, silent abyss. The world was reduced to the few feet before his headlights, guided only by the faint cheer of neighbors' Christmas lights. Yet in the periphery, something flickered, a dark shape, unnaturally quick, darting just out of sight. His radio surrendered, melody swallowed by a growing static, and an impossible, bone-deep cold seeped into his very soul. Panic mounting, he drove into a miraculous pocket of clear air. Relief was instant but fleeting. Before he could move, a heavy, unearthly thud slammed onto his car roof. No branch, no explanation. He staggered out, gasping, checking the time on his phone. 4 a.m. An hour had passed, and he'd barely moved. Then he saw it. Standing motionless at the fog's retreating edge was a figure. Tall, impossibly gaunt, a sharp, dreadful silhouette. The creature was waiting, and the fog was creeping back. He ran, but the silence swallowed his screams. The world went deafeningly quiet until an icy, unyielding hand clamped onto his calf. He fell, rolling onto his back, and saw the face of his terror, a gaunt, skeletal creature with hollow eyes and a stretched, cracked grin exposing jagged teeth. With a desperate kick to its mouth, he bought a moment's reprieve. It released him, retreating into the haze, but not in pain. Its exit was accompanied by a guttural, mocking laugh. It was amused. Blinded by the disorientation, he stumbled back to his car. The wound on his leg was not a burn, as he'd first thought, but a spreading patch of unnatural crystalline frostbite. He fled, gripping the wheel, but the creature had already tainted his sanctuary. The heater blasted impossible cold. The radio screeched static that felt like it was inside his mind, and the beast's mocking laugh echoed over it all. Then came the final, cruel torment. His fiancée's familiar voice, distorted, morphing into the monster's guttural laugh. It was playing with him, savoring his terror. He glanced in the rearview mirror, and there it was, gaunt, grinning, seated in the back seat. He whirled around. Empty. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, replaced by the sound of hysterical, overlapping laughter echoing through the fog. He was done. But just then he saw it. The faint redeeming glow of his employer's sign. Safety was a mad dash away. Grabbing a forgotten baseball bat, he bolted, pushing through the agonizing pain in his injured leg. Behind him, the single laugh became a stampede of footsteps, a chorus of mockery. He turned. Nothing. Then he saw it again, standing guard before his salvation. He swung the bat. A sickening crack echoed, and the creature stumbled. That moment of surprise was all he needed. He slammed his badge against the scanner, heard the glorious beep of salvation, and threw himself inside, slamming the door. Through the glass, he watched the monster tremble with rage. It couldn't follow. The building was a barrier. But as he turned and faced his bewildered coworker, his relief was short-lived. He knew the truth. He hadn't escaped. He had been marked. The fogwalker is still out there. Its laugh is in his dreams. Its shadow flickers behind him in mirrors. And on every foggy day, the frostbite on his leg aches with a dreadful, icy chill. A constant reminder that it is watching, waiting. And one day, his luck will run out. After moving into his new home, that nightmare began with a single sighting, a roach on his kitchen table. He crushed it, thinking it was over, but then came two more, then a dozen, then an army. His house was overrun. The infestation was so severe, he knew he couldn't fight it alone. He called an exterminator. When the professional arrived, even he was terrified. 25 years, he gasped. And I've never seen anything like this. The man in the exterminator battled the horde, driving the surviving roaches into the darkest corner of the house, the basement. The exterminator was confident. Spray the basement, and the nightmare ends. As the exterminator went down, spraying his final can of insecticide, the homeowner waited, relieved. But the spraying stopped, silence. He called out, no answer. He crept down the stairs, finding the exterminator frozen solid at the bottom step, trembling. "Run," the exterminator whispered, his voice shaking. "Get out of here before it's too late." And then the homeowner saw what paralyzed the man. Lying in the center of the basement were a dozen squirming, dog-sized cockroach larvae, ready to hatch. But worse horrors waited. From the shadows, a creature emerged. It was a woman, yet not human. She had antennae, forearms, and the horrifying compound black eyes and wings of a giant roach, the Roach Queen. Before either man could move, the queen hissed and pointed. More children, even bigger roaches, scrambled toward them. The exterminator tried his spray, but the creatures were immune. The homeowner ran. He looked back just in time to see the queen's gigantic offspring descend upon the poor exterminator, devouring him alive until only a skeleton remained. With a heart pounding in his chest, the man slammed the basement door shut, locked it, and fled in his car, driving as far away as possible. He drove straight to his parents' house, desperate for sanctuary. He told them his terrifying tale of the Roach Queen and her monstrous children. They laughed, thinking it a joke. But as their laughter filled the air, a familiar sound came from outside the window. A scraping, scratching noise, followed by a long, terrible hiss. The Roach Queen had followed him, and the nightmare was just beginning.